Hi everyone and welcome back. We are now at week 8 of the 52 Sunday Dinners Project. Here is what we're making today. We start our dinner off with a cream of carrot soup. Then for our main course, breaded pork chops and fried apples. On the side of that, we have boiled potatoes. There are pickles and corn pudding. And then in the middle, we have a German coffee cake before we serve our cold slaw salad. I'm not quite sure about why we're doing a cake before the salad, but we're gonna go with it. And then for dessert, we're having another cake in the cocoa whipped cream dessert. And as always, it's supposed to be served with coffee. I usually do tea, but whatever you decide to drink while you're watching this is up to you. If this is your first time joining us, welcome. I'm so glad that you're here. My name is Ashley. I'm a registered dietitian and I love everything vintage and food. If you'd like to know a little bit more about what the purpose of what we're doing is here, you can refer back to week 1 where I give a little bit more of an explanation. And if you like what you're seeing and want to join the conversation, we have a Facebook group as well. You can join. There's a link in the description below. Now let's jump into the kitchen and get started on this meal. Before we start cooking, look at how cute this little outfit is with the jacket. It has a matching jacket. And it should have a belt here, but I don't have the original belt. But look at these buttons here. The texture on those is adorable. And it even comes with, so there is a little button here with a little loop so that it holds this tight and it's not flopping out everywhere. It's so cute. And the jacket and pockets are lined. In the spring, I'm going to start doing a collection clean out. I'd say a closet clean out, but my collection doesn't even come close to fitting in my 2 closets. So I think I'm going to end up letting this piece go to somebody that has maybe a little less in the hip area. It would probably fit them better, but look at the lining in this jacket and it's on the pockets too. Isn't that adorable? The hem also underneath comes with a little surprise, but I'm not going to show you my hem at this moment. But let's get in and start baking. We're starting with the German coffee cake. And when I think of coffee cake, I think of, I don't know if it's different in other parts of the world, but in America, or at least the part of America I'm from, I think of like a crumbly kind of cake with a brown sugar butter kind of crumble topping. And when I think of German coffee cake, automatically my head goes German chocolate cake. And so when I was reading this recipe is not at all what I was expecting. I was expecting either coffee cake or something with maybe some pecans and some coconut. However, we instead have this. This German coffee cake requires a lot of rising, at least from my interpretation. When it's saying to add the yeast liquid when it is light, I assume that means when it has foamed up and is kind of light and airy. Then again, after we add our flour, salt, cup of milk, they want us again to let this grow light, which will take about an hour. So I assume that means to let it rise. Once it has risen, then we're going to mix together the half a cup of butter, half a cup of sugar, and an egg. After that comes the fruit. So this is more of a fruit cake than what I think of as a coffee cake. We're adding raisins. Ours are seedless. The half a cup of citron, I don't know if they want this to be candied or not. We do have some candied oranges, and I have lemons. So I'm considering which one I want to use, what one I think they probably meant here. But either way, we're going to dredge it in flour, and then we're going to let it rise again. When it says to knead it into a roll and pinch the ends together, this is again where I'm not sure, does it mean like a dinner roll where they want us to roll it into a ball, or do they want us to flatten it out and then roll it and then pinch the ends together? and then butter the top with soft butter. So I'm not sure. We have a 50-50 chance here. We are either going to do this really well, it's going to turn out amazing, or we're going to completely do the opposite of what we're supposed to do, and it's not going to turn out correctly. I may turn to the internet to determine whether I want to roll it out and then roll it back up, or if I want to roll it into a ball. So I think I'll double check, see if I can find some information on the internet before we make that determination. Okay, this has doubled in size. However, I can say with almost 100% certainty, I don't know if you can see it moving around in there, there is about a 0% chance that we're going to be able to knead this. And after doing a little bit of online sleuthing, I could not find a recipe that was too similar to this. When I Googled German coffee cake with some of these ingredients, other things came up. However, they had a lot more flour in them. And I just don't think that this recipe has enough flour in order for it to be kneaded. And then also, the way I'm reading this recipe, I assume in my mind now, I've determined, I think it wanted us to knead it into sort of a log and bring it together into maybe like an O shape, into a circle, and then spread some butter, sprinkle cinnamon sugar. The cakes that I saw online were all baked in bundt pans, the ones that were similar with the fruit in them. So that's what we're going to do, because there's just, even if this were regular flour, we can't blame this texture, I think, on the gluten-free flour. Even if it were regular flour, there's no way this would be thick enough to knead it. So I have this baking pan here. This is the silicone one. We used this on the Jell-O molds before, and it didn't work out well for the Jell-O molds, but we're gonna try it with this cake and see, maybe it'll be okay with the cake. Again, with this texture, we aren't going to add any butter to the top because I'm not gonna be able to spread. I mean, look at, you can see it, look at that. There's no way I'm gonna be able to spread any butter on top of this. And so I think we will just sprinkle it with cinnamon sugar, and the cinnamon sugar will then be on the bottom when we flip this out. So maybe we'll also sprinkle a little bit of it on top after it has baked.
Over in her face. For a second, it looks like I've got through to her. For a second, I am jubilant.
Once again, I find the writing of these recipes just so interesting, odd. I don't know what the word is, but looking at it, it makes me question if I know what I know. So when it says 3 teaspoons of one thing and then a tablespoon of another, why not just stay consistent? Why not just say 3 teaspoons and 3 teaspoons, or 1 tablespoon and 1 tablespoon? It's so odd. Am I the only one that feels that way? The cocoa whipped cream dessert also threw me off a little bit. Are any of you Spanish or Cuban, and does this look familiar at all to you? When I saw cocoa whipped cream dessert, I was picturing something like in a parfait glass, and maybe just the cocoa whipped cream would be the dessert. Not that there would be a cake with cocoa whipped cream on top, but we're going to see how this turns out. We're going to start by creaming butter and then adding sugar to that. To those, we're adding well-beaten egg yolks. Then the flour that I'm using for these recipes, I've already sifted everything. It's the Namaste Perfect Flour Blend, I believe. It's a blend of several flours. It says you can use it in place of regular wheat flour 1-to-1. So we've had great luck with the King Arthur 1-to-1. I thought we'd give this one a try. We'll see how it turns out. In with our flour, we're sifting baking powder, cocoa powder, and cinnamon. And I love cinnamon and cocoa together, so I hope this is going to be good. We're going to alternate adding the flour mixture with milk. Then we're going to bake this in 2 separate tins. It says 2-layer cake tins. Now, I don't know if that means that we are supposed to do just 2 layers, or if it's a layer cake tin, Are we supposed to cut it in half and this is supposed to be 4 layers? For the ease of, I guess, the recipes for us, I think I'm going to keep it in 2 unless it seems like these layers are way too thick and it's going to be way too much cake. We'll see once they come out what happens. It wants us to cook in a moderate oven for 35 minutes. Now we're making this the day before, and I'm not going to make the whipped cream and put it together until tomorrow because I don't want all that whipped cream to fall. So we'll make these today, let them cool, cover them, and we'll get it ready tomorrow. Looking at this and smelling it right now, I kind of just want to dip things in it. Like, I want to go get strawberries. And it is Valentine's Day tomorrow as of the day of filming this, so I extra want to go get strawberries and dip it in this chocolate. However, we will continue to use it as our whipped cream. Oh, adding that vanilla to it, it smells heavenly. Hopefully this isn't too thin. However, I'll get this mixed up and then we'll start whipping it. Look at how cool those designs are. Our cakes turned out pretty well, I think. And I think I'm gonna leave it as just 2 layers instead of cutting this one in half. I think this layer is an okay size. And I think we will certainly have enough to go between the layers for this cake and to go on top and maybe even on the outside. Oh, this smells so good. Ooh, it's a little crummy. Looks like a giant cookie sandwich, kind of. I don't know if we're supposed to go all the way around for it, but we're going to because we have lots. Brown-eyed girl, you'll love this. And there's still plenty left over. I think I'll put it in a little container and send it to a neighbor's house to put in their coffee. I have an adorable idea for decorating this. I have found this little I love you toast thing. I don't know if it's a stamper or a cutter, but what if we dusted this with cocoa powder and dipped it into the whipped cream? This might turn out disastrously. It might be adorable. Let's see. Okay. Looks like there's enough on there. Let's see what happens. It's not as adorable as I wanted it to be, but it's cute enough. We're also making the coleslaw salad a day ahead of time because I like mine to sit in the dressing and kind of soak all those flavors in. And I think it tends to taste better, at least to me, after a day or 2 of everything kind of melding together. So I'm going to attempt to shred with this grater here. We'll see if it works. It seems to be working okay. What do you think of those shreds? I think that looks pretty okay. So the cream and egg mixture seems to be thick already. I'm going to try not to add the vinegar too quickly so I don't curdle it or cook it. Hopefully this turns out correctly. So far, so good. I'll tell you, hot vinegar is overpowering when the vapor is right under your nose. I don't remember exactly what went into the boiled dressing that we made before, but I assume this is pretty similar to it. And I don't remember how long it took to thicken. It's been about 5 or 6 minutes, and it is starting to get a little bit thicker. If you look at, you pull it up, it coats the side of the pan there. So I think in order to avoid, it might get thicker, but I want to avoid burning it or just whatever shouldn't happen to it. I want to avoid that. And it seems thick enough to me for a coleslaw dressing, so we're going to stop here. I didn't soak my cabbage, and I don't know what the purpose of doing that is, but I was afraid with the colanders that I have and the strainers that I have, the size of them, I was afraid I was going to lose the shredded cabbage in between in the holes when I drained it, and so I just decided not to do that. And maybe that was the wrong move, I'm not sure, but I also think, looking at this now, it looks like this is going to soak up that dressing pretty immediately. It didn't say how much cabbage to have shredded, so I think we might have a bit too much cabbage or not quite enough dressing. However, that's okay. We'll see how it tastes with this ratio, and you'll know to use either a smaller head of cabbage or to make a double bit of dressing if when we try this tomorrow, it's a little too cabbagey and not dressingy enough. The last thing we're gonna make this evening is the corn pudding. I'd like to have it done tonight. That way it kind of thickens and sets overnight, and I kind of want to have it at room temperature or cold with our pork chops tomorrow instead of warm. Now, there's a couple things that I'm not sure about with this recipe, but we're gonna find out. At first, I was going to do just 1 can of corn because it calls for the contents of a can of corn. Then I remembered the conversations we've had previously where a can of corn in the 1920s probably would have been home canned, and it would have been a quart. So we're going to use 2. Now, the thing I'm a little bit confused about is it says to use the contents of a can of corn. Does that mean drain it? Does that mean use the water inside? Now, this corn already has a little bit of sugar in it, so the recipe calls for sugar if you want to. We're not going to add any, it's already in here. And this corn is probably sweeter than what corn would have been in the 1920s. Knowing that we have a cup of milk already, to me it seems like it would be way too much liquid to have that much combined with all of this and still want it to thicken up. So I think we're going to drain both of them. We're going to cut this soup in half, and I have 1 cup of the water that we boiled the carrots in and 1 cup of sweet milk. It's just whole milk. And instead of the flour butter mixture, we're going to thicken this with cornstarch. It might take away a little bit of the flavor because with the flour and the butter, you would have a little bit more creaminess and richness, but I don't think it'll change it that much that we need to add it. Maybe after tasting it, I'll change my mind, but we'll decide that after. It gives the option to add curry powder if we like, which is a surprising option for me in this cookbook because it just doesn't seem like something that would be popular at that time. But I like curry powder, and so we're going to go ahead and add some. I think along with the carrots, it'll give this, the turmeric in this will give it a nice color. I got mini potatoes, a tricolor of them, because I thought it would just be very cute for our little meal today. And I also decided I'm not going to pair them because I bought the little ones and I like potato skins. So we just washed them thoroughly and now we're gonna let them soak in cold water for a while. I have to say, this seems like a rather odd way of boiling potatoes, but what do I know? Let's try a duck egg for this one. Everything about the duck eggs are much thicker than a chicken egg. And you can see that yolk is kind of bouncing around in there and it is difficult to break, and even the albumin is exceptionally thick. Look at that beautiful yolk. And this is, I think this one's just a store-bought chicken egg. Ah! That yolk is pretty easy to break open. Just look at how thick this duck yolk is. Isn't that crazy? I added a little extra milk into this mixture because that duck egg is so big. And for this, I'm actually using almond milk. Now, I don't like almond milk really, but for those of you who have been around for the last several weeks, you know I'm having some dietary restrictions going on right now, and moving forward, one of them is that I'm supposed to be avoiding dairy almost exclusively. However, I have the approval to taste a few bites of things that have dairy in them during these videos, but other than that, I'm supposed to be totally avoiding it. So in places where it's not totally necessary to have dairy milk, like in the whipping cream, we wouldn't be substituting almond milk for the cream in the whipped cream, or even, I guess, coconut cream. I would really like that, but it would really alter the flavor of what it was originally intended to be. And so I won't be substituting dairy milk for anything else when it seems like it's necessary. But for things like this here, I don't think it's totally necessary. That's also why I won't be making the gravy today, because we've made gravy about, I don't even know how many times already. You've seen me redo it. It's the same recipe over and over, and it would end up probably going to waste. Now, I will be bringing some of these things to neighbors, but I think for this one, we're gonna skip the gravy just so we're not being wasteful. They do also sell gluten-free breadcrumbs, and I thought about buying them, but they are expensive, and so, I mean, so is the bread that I bought. I think I paid like $6 for this loaf of bread, and this one, if you want to know which one it is, I bought this loaf of bread because I think they had maybe 2 or 3 options at my store. And eventually I'm sure I'll learn how to make it myself. But we're going to just make our own breadcrumbs with it. Ooh, that came out fast. I cooked that one a little too long. And now for my very favorite part of the evening, the tasting part. We are starting our meal off with a cream of carrot soup. And if you remember, last week we had creamed carrots as a side. And I don't know if they mean for us to be using the creamed carrots, the leftovers of those in this soup, if they were supposed to save the water from boiling. I'm not really sure. Or if it was just, hey, because you have carrots out, or if you're purchasing carrots from a grocery store and you don't already have it in your cold storage here, use it in this week's dinner as well. But let's give it a smell. It does smell really nice. It smells sweet like carrots, and you get a little bit of that curry in there. And you can see, I don't know if you can see, but the broth is a little bit orangey yellow from the turmeric and the carrot water. Let's give it a taste. That's really good. It tastes very strong like carrots. It kind of tastes just like the creamed carrots, except a little thinner and soupier, I guess. And I probably have more carrots in here in my bowl than we're supposed to. It said to chop up 1 carrot and put it in for the whole soup, but I probably have like half of a carrot in my little piece of soup here, so I imagine probably you were supposed to just get a few little pieces of carrot, maybe not all of this, but it's a very nice, warm, comforting way to start a meal up. On to our main course. The order in which they want us to eat this, I find a little bit odd. Just that the coleslaw seems to come after the German coffee cake. So I don't know if this is supposed to be a nice long meal and you have a little bit of coffee cake and coffee in between it as a break, and then you're supposed to start up with a salad and then dessert again. I'm not really sure. Or is just the order in which they wrote the menu just a little bit different, because a lot of things about this cookbook are a little bit strange. Now, if you want to see the corn casserole, the inside of that, you can see there is a lot of corn, it appears, in there. And I think if we had only used 1 can of like the pint-sized can, I just don't think that would have been enough. It's holding its shape very nicely. It seems to have a nice distribution of the kernels in there. And so I think using both of those cans, which probably would have equaled about a quart, was the right move. Now let's give this pork chop a try. And now, if you remember, this is supposed to have gravy, but we decided against it. And I imagine when it said to cook these for 20 minutes, I imagine they were thinking pork chops that were really probably a lot more thickly cut and probably fattier than what these are. These are probably a little thinner and less fatty than what was mentioned in this book or what would have been expected in this book, because there wasn't a ton of pork fat nor really any pork juices left over to use for a gravy. Really what was left in there was a little bit of oil that wasn't soaked up and sucked up by this breading. So I think probably the pork chops that I bought were just a little bit different, but it does smell really nice, even with that little bit of burning on the outside, but that's okay. It'll give it a little extra depth of flavor. We'll call it a mature flavor. That's pretty tasty. I wasn't sure what to expect with the gluten-free breadcrumbs that we made, but they don't taste any different than a normal breadcrumb, I don't think. The texture on this is very nice. We really cooked it kind of, if I were to have pork chops, this is exactly how I would cook mine in a skillet. I probably wouldn't bread it, but I would cook it in the skillet like that. And so I think this is, I don't know, this is a pretty classic recipe that's kind of held through mostly. It reminds me, looking at it, it reminded me of shake and bake. You guys remember shake and bake pork chops and chicken? I think it was probably popular in the 90s and early 2000s. It might still be popular today, but I loved shake and bake. And fried apples. We had some of those cinnamon apples probably a few months ago. You know, pork chops and apple sauce. It's a very classic combination. And so the pork and the fried apples, it's kind of a fun and different way, at least for me to have it. Maybe it was normal back then, but I like it. Let's see how they taste together. That is perfect together. I really like the tartness of those apples against the savory, salty pork chop. It's a really, really nice contrast. How about our potatoes? Let's see. Oh, how cute. Look at how purple that is. Right. Smells like potato and parsley. Maybe it's just a placebo effect in my head, but I do think that putting that towel over top of these potatoes and letting it maybe soak up some of that steam back in a little bit, this potato tastes or feels creamier than some other times that I have had these same potatoes before. And maybe I'm making it up in my head. It's a possibility, but it's really, really tasty and nice and creamy. I like that. I think that's a great method if you have a second to just let it sit with a towel over top. And maybe this is something people do all the time and it's just a method that went over my head, but I think that's wonderful. The corn smells so good. It smells so sweet, sweet corn. I'm excited to try this one. Oh, that's very good. And I like it. I served it cold. I pulled it out of the refrigerator and served it cold against some of these other warm temperatures. And I think the coldness of it really is a nice contrast. Again, some of these things have been contrasting and complementing each other very well. And I think the coldness of that is complementing this very nicely. And it kind of reminds me, you know what this reminds me of right now? I wish this was chicken. I mean, I don't wish it was chicken, but we have the corn, the potatoes, this savory meat, our coleslaw. I kind of feel like I have half a KFC bowl with their coleslaw on the side. It even kind of looks like KFC coleslaw a little bit. Yeah, that's kind of funny. I skipped the pickles again this week. If you have watched the last several weeks, you know why. And I have them in the fridge, some of those kind of sweet hot pickles. And there's just so many other things here. I decided to skip over it. But I think it also, that acidity would have paired well here. And I know it calls for the coffee cake next, but I just don't want to have a sweet coffee cake, go back to the coleslaw, back to something sweet. I think I would like to have my coleslaw with this, and I am the lady of the house and can make that decision, and so we're going to. I smell the vinegar mostly in this, actually even over top of the cabbage. Usually when you have cabbage, and I think probably cauliflower, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, you know what that smells like. You get that cruciferous smell coming out, but with this, it's really the vinegar that's coming out. Let's give it a taste. That's a lot sweeter than I expected. I like the vinegar in it, but it's almost a little too sweet for my preference. If you like it a little bit sweet, this is probably perfect for you. And my thought that it wasn't going to be nearly enough dressing because it was going to soak all of it up and seem dry is totally wrong. This seems like almost the perfect amount of dressing for this. Let's see. I don't know if you can see it in there. It's not dripping and sopping wet or anything, which is good because sometimes I think that's pretty off-putting, but it soaked it up nicely, and actually I think it's kind of the perfect ratio texture for this. All right, on to what I would call the desserts. Here is how the German coffee cake turned out. I think considering it turned out pretty nicely. Let's give it a little slice. In case you're admiring my dress also and wondering about it, I believe this is the last square dancing dress that I have. I have 4 of them, and I believe I've worn all 4 on here. So get a good look, because I think this is the last one you're going to see so far. Here is the inside of that. And, ooh, it feels very greasy. Although that could be from, no, it's not from the outside. I thought maybe it's from the way I greased it. But if you want to see inside here, Kristen from Bake Across Europe, if you have any insight on this, I looked to see if you had made anything under the name of this before, and I cannot pronounce it. I'm not going to attempt to because it will be embarrassing. But if you've made anything like this, or if you plan to, or you have any input, let us know. It smells very yeasty. It smells a lot like kind of the yeasty fruit cakes that you're used to, or at least that I'm used to smelling and tasting. Yeah, this is delicious. I wouldn't hesitate to make this again. I think I could have baked it a little bit longer. I think I like the texture of things that are under-baked a little bit, but I know that that's not the standard. Most people like their things baked all the way through. So I think I wouldn't bake this again because I'm not a baker, but if somebody else baked this, I would just suggest baking it a little bit longer, and oh my goodness, I would be thrilled to be offered this if I was having tea or coffee at somebody's house. This is wonderful. I think choosing the candied orange was perfect in this. That candied orange and the raisin really play off of each other nicely, and that yeasty flavor in the background, I think it all works so well together. The texture of this is great for me. I think this was a wonderful recipe. Looking at the instructions compared to what we came up with, I really thought this was going to be an absolute disaster, and I can't call it anything but a success. Now for the one that I have been looking forward to since the moment I looked at these recipes, and you know, I love you guys. let's cut into this thing. The cut feels very nice. Right, there is what we're looking at. And I think visually, it looks okay. There isn't much of a contrast in the colors of the cake versus the icing. Now, that isn't something that I care about particularly, but if I was somebody who did, I think I would notice that pretty quickly. It smells like cocoa and cinnamon. This smells amazing. Oh, yeah, this smells incredible. Please don't disappoint me. It smells like something familiar, but I don't know. I have some sort of a memory associated with this smell, the cocoa powder and the cinnamon. I just don't know what it is. Oh, that doesn't disappoint at all. The texture of this cake is not moist, but kind of dense. It sticks together a little bit, like it's airy when you're looking at it, and it looks kind of dry when you look at it. So just visually, to me, that looks a little bit dry, and you can see the air pockets in it, but once you taste it, the mouthfeel, it comes together very differently than what I would expect it to. I would expect it to kind of crumble dryly in your mouth, but it does the opposite. And the whipped topping in this, it's just perfect. It's not exceptionally sweet. It's there's a little bit of sweetness, a little bit of bitterness. Nani, if you're watching this, you should be so jealous. You would love this. In fact, I think we'll have to make this the next time we're together. Yes, the first bite, the whipped cream in between, you couldn't tell that it was light and airy. You could taste it, but you couldn't feel it. The whipped cream from the top, you get that really light, airy flavor without heaviness in it. I don't know if this is still popular or not, but this is 100% a bring it back win. I don't know how much better this would be if it had gluten in it, but gluten-free, you can't really tell. I would say this flour mix is a win also. Yeah, bring this recipe back. All of you who decide to make some kind of special dessert, try this. Share it on the Facebook group. Share it with us. Let us know how it goes. Let us know what you think of it, because, man, this is amazing. It's amazing. Now, this menu was one that I was pleasantly surprised at how economical it actually was. There was so many different ingredients in this meal, and it was so versatile. And also, it seemed like a very big meal that could stretch for easily probably 10 to 12 people, or you'd be having more tomorrow. This meal probably cost today somewhere between $40 and $60 for 6 people. It was not all that expensive for everything we had at all. Nutrition-wise, again, I'm surprised at the amount of fruits and vegetables in here. We're starting it off with carrots in the soup. We have cabbage in the coleslaw, corn in our casserole. We have the potatoes for the fruit. We have our fried apples on the side, and there's some fruit in that cake. Now, I do think it is a little bit carb heavy. Again, for me, we have the potatoes on the side, the corn casserole. We have 2 separate cakes in here, and maybe we weren't supposed to serve both cakes. Maybe you were only supposed to serve one and it was supposed to be a choice of one or the other. But if you took away one of those cakes, I think this probably would be a very nicely balanced meal. Overall, I think I've already said, I really liked the compliments that everything gave each other. Some of these things are classic combinations, corn and potatoes, pork chops and apples. I think coleslaw goes well with all of these foods, but having that German coffee cake and that cocoa whipped dessert, I think really everything paired so nicely together. If you liked what you saw today, please consider liking this video and subscribing to this channel so that you never miss a dinner. Join us next week where we make chicken noodle soup with homemade noodles and floating islands. See you later. And then here's Tori and I again in the front yard at Nani's house. I don't know where Tori's going. She has a suitcase. But that's us right here in the front yard.
This almost looks like a Beaver Island or something.
This?
Where?
This is your front yard. What are you talking about? I know so. Hold on. We'll do this. Ready?
Is the river, but we don't have a church across the street.
There is no church across. I think you don't know what picture I'm looking at.
I guess not.